In a quiet, secluded town, there was a road known as Glashill, infamous for its eerie silence and for the handful of isolated houses scattered along its path. The road was notorious for the Glashill murders, a string of brutal killings that had remained unsolved for decades, haunting the memories of locals who still recalled the blood-chilling details. It started in the 1970s with the disappearance of a young woman named Laura Marks. She had been last seen heading to Glashill Road to babysit for a family whose home was nestled deep in the woods. Laura never returned, and all that was ever found of her was a torn shoe, lying alone in the muddy dirt of Glashill Road. Years passed and more young women vanished. Always the same type, small, dark-haired, and in their early 20s. A local urban legend started to spread that the road itself was cursed, that anyone who went up to Glashill alone would be marked for death. Despite the whispers, no one truly believed it, until the Smith family moved into the house at the very end of Glashill. The Smiths seemed normal enough, a father, his quiet wife, and their teenage daughter, Amy. But the family kept to themselves, and something about them seemed off. Amy rarely spoke, and when she did, people claimed her voice sounded like a child's, even though she was nearly 16. Not long after they moved in, young women began disappearing again. Rumors swirled that Amy's father had a dark past, but there was nothing in the town records, nothing that could ever be proven. Still, when a local girl named Holly went missing one cold night after heading up to babysit for the Smiths, fear rippled through the community. Holly's friends went to the police, but her case went cold within weeks, like all the others. Driven by grief, Holly's boyfriend, Sam, decided to investigate on his own. He started by walking up Glashill Road and snooping around the Smiths' property late at night, keeping a low profile. One night, he noticed something strange. Amy standing in the window, staring out at the woods, and next to her was her father, but he was smiling in a way that chilled Sam to his core. Then, out of nowhere, Amy turned her head, locking eyes with Sam. Her gaze was hollow, as if she could see straight through him. That's when Sam made a terrifying discovery. Under the cover of night, he dug through old newspaper clippings and hidden police records. He found something horrifying. Every girl who had vanished had babysat for the same family before disappearing. But here was the strangest part. The records listed a different family name each time. The Smiths weren't the first family to live on Glashill, but Amy had been there each time under a different last name. Desperate, Sam convinced two friends to break into the Smiths' house, hoping to find proof to take to the police. They waited until the family was out and slipped inside. The house was dim and silent, almost suffocating. In the basement, they found old boxes labeled with names: Marks, Jones, Wilson. Inside were pieces of clothing, hair ties, and even personal items that had belonged to the missing girls. Then they found the photographs, dozens of them, all of Amy with her parents, each pair looking different over the years. But Amy was always the same, unchanged, her face bearing that same eerie stare. The sound of footsteps upstairs sent a jolt of panic through them. They hurriedly stuffed a few photographs into their pockets and scrambled to hide. As they held their breath in the dark, they heard voices, a woman's quiet sobs and Amy's voice, clear and unnervingly childlike. "I told you," Amy said in a soft, sing-song tone. "I told you they'd come. They always do." The friends bolted up the stairs, nearly slipping in their haste. When they burst through the front door, they ran straight into the police, who had arrived after neighbors reported suspicious activity. But as they tried to explain what they'd found, the Smiths emerged from the house behind them, calm, composed, and accusing the kids of trying to rob them. It took weeks for Sam and his friends to be cleared, but by then the Smiths were gone, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only an empty house and chilling memories. The police eventually dismissed the case, claiming the photos were part of an old family tradition. Months later, in a town just a few hours away, A new family moved into a secluded house on Maple Lane, a father, a quiet wife, and a teenage daughter named Amy, with her hollow stare and a disconcerting, childlike smile. Locals were struck by how timeless she looked, and soon enough, young women began disappearing once again. Years after his terrifying encounter with Amy and the strange family on Glasshill Road, Sam had moved away, but the memories haunted him. Every night he would see Amy's face in his dreams, her cold, hollow eyes, and the eerie way she pointed at him from behind the window, as if marking him. He tried to convince himself it was all a mistake, that his imagination had played tricks on him in his grief over losing Holly. But then he began to see news reports of strange disappearances in other small towns. Always young women, dark-haired, small-statured, and eerily similar to those who had disappeared along Glass Hill. One night, unable to resist his need for answers any longer, Sam returned to Glass Hill. He drove slowly up the winding road, past houses now overgrown and neglected, past places where his friends had found those boxes with the names of missing girls. But when he arrived at the old Thompson house, he found it abandoned, a derelict shell, empty except for a basement door that stood ajar. Something inside him compelled him to go down those steps. As he descended into the darkness, he felt an overwhelming sense of déjà vu. The basement, stripped bare of the boxes and photographs, seemed empty at first glance, but then he noticed an old mirror propped against the far wall, covered in dust. It was an antique, its once beautiful frame now cracked and weathered. As he wiped away the grime, a figure appeared in the reflection. Amy. But Amy wasn't alone. Behind her stood shadowy figures, dozens of them, faces frozen in expressions of terror. Sam realized with a chill that these were the faces of the girls who had vanished from Glass Hill over the years. He staggered back, horrified. Amy's reflection remained, her face twisted into an expression that was no longer childlike, but malicious and ancient. Her mouth curled into a wicked smile. Suddenly he heard a whispering voice in his head, soft yet commanding. "You're wondering where they went, aren't you?" It was Amy's voice, but it seemed to resonate from deep within the walls. Amy's reflection continued to speak, her voice hollow and detached. "They're here, inside the mirror. They tried to leave, but I took them with me. They wanted to live forever, and now they will, as part of me." In a horrifying realization, Sam understood the truth. Amy was no ordinary girl. She was a vessel, a collector of souls. Each family she had lived with over the years was merely a disguise, moving from town to town, that luring young women into her trap. Each girl she took was absorbed into her, fueling her life and keeping her young and timeless. It was why her appearance never changed, why she always seemed both ancient and childlike. Sam felt himself drawn closer to the mirror, unable to break away from her hypnotic gaze. As he stared into the glass, Amy's face began to morph and blend with the faces of the other girls, merging into one grotesque, shifting mask. The whispers grew louder, and he felt himself being pulled toward the glass, as if invisible hands were reaching out, dragging him forward. "You'll stay with me, too," Amy whispered, her voice dripping with dark satisfaction, "and you'll be part of my story forever." With all the strength he could muster, Sam tore himself away, stumbling back up the stairs and out of the house. The whispers grew fainter as he ran, but Amy's laugh echoed in his mind, chilling him to his core. He never spoke of what he saw that night, but he knew one thing. Amy and her family would continue their cycle, moving from town to town, preying on unsuspecting young women, each one disappearing without a trace. Their souls would be bound to the mirror, feeding Amy's eternal youth, until someone finally shattered her curse. But who would be brave or foolish enough to try?